now. Economic news packaged from a different angle. Korea had been reliant on Japan for core components and technology, but after Japan's trade restrictions, we are seeing a localization boom in many industries. Learn about Korea's manufacturing industries in the world of robotics, automobiles, batteries, and more. And hear about the importance of independent technology and material development in the country. Korea 4.0.
Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea, China, and Japan in a three-way summit reaffirmed their support for getting the nuclear talks between North Korea and the U.S. restarted. They also pledged support for free trade and friendly exchanges in sports. Separately, South Korea's President Moon and Japan's Prime Minister Abe sit down one-on-one to discuss the thorny issues of trade and history that have caused ties between their countries to deteriorate. There's hope the talks will at least create a pathway to a resolution. And the CEO of Boeing is fired over the 737 MAX fiasco that led to 2 deadly plane crashes and a bungled response. After that move to win back trust, Boeing's stock jumped almost 3%. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul on Christmas Eve. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing have reaffirmed their commitment to promoting talks between North Korea and the U.S. on the nuclear issue. In a joint press briefing earlier today, President Moon said the 3 countries will continue to work together to advance the peace process. Park Hee-jun has the latest.
South Korea, Japan, and China will continue their joint efforts to get North Korea and the U.S. to resume their talks as part of achieving peace on the Korean Peninsula. This is according to President Moon Jae-in at a joint press conference Tuesday with the Prime Minister of Japan and China's number 2 after the trilateral summit in Cheongju.
셋째, 한중일 3국은 앞으로도 한반도의 비핵화와 항구적 평화를 위해 긴밀한 소통과 협력을 계속해 나가기로 했습니다. 우리는 한반도의 평화가 3국의 공동이익에 부합한다는 데 인식을 같이 했고 북미 대화의 조속한 대화를 통해 비핵화와 평화가 실질적으로 진전되도록 함께 노력하기로 했습니다.
These 3 parties crucial to the peace process met as North Korea escalates tensions with its missile tests and threats against the U.S. And the year-end deadline set by the North for Washington to make concessions is nearly up. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed full support for South Korea's peace efforts, while condemning the North's missile provocations, which he says violate UN Security Council resolutions and threaten regional security. Abe said Japan will help maintain the momentum of dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington.
Full backing for the North Korea-U.S. process is important to achieve North Korea's complete denuclearization. For that, we reaffirm that we must strictly enforce the UNSC resolutions and keep up the momentum of dialogue.
The leaders also agreed in their summit talks to uphold free trade.
All of us support free trade and economic investment. Protecting free trade helps protect multilateralism and world peace.
Premier Lee revealed that Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing are hoping for an early signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and they plan to speed up negotiations for a trilateral free trade deal. He added that China will continue to open its economy, stressing the need for greater cooperation in areas like services, finance, and science technology. And with the 2020 Tokyo Olympics drawing near, South Korea and China promised their full support. Through active exchanges in sports, the three countries reaffirmed their commitment to deepen their friendly ties. They will also strengthen partnerships regarding environment and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The talks in Beijing opened a promising future for three-way cooperation, as described by President Moon. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
And on the sidelines of the three-way summit in Cheongdu, President Moon and his Japanese counterpart, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, have just wrapped up their one-on-one meeting. This was their sixth formal summit, but their first in 15 months, and they were expected to have discussed their country's trade and historical issues. No outcomes have been reported yet. There were still questions, though, as to whether they'd be able to reach a breakthrough. This past Friday, Japan announced it would be relaxing some of its export curbs on South Korea, which the presidential office in Seoul welcomed, but said would not be enough to fundamentally resolve their historical differences. And the top diplomats of South Korea and Japan agreed earlier today on the need for a successful bilateral summit between their leaders this afternoon in Cheongdu. Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and her Japanese counterpart Toshimitsu Motegi met this morning to coordinate the summit agenda. They also exchanged views on matters of mutual interest to their countries, including trade and wartime history. Seoul's foreign ministry welcomed Japan's partial lifting of export restrictions on one of the three materials that it had decided to limit and called for the lifting of all the controls. On the issue of wartime forced labor, Kang said Seoul's Supreme Court ruling ordering Japanese companies to compensate South Korean victims is not a violation of international law. Aside from the thornier issues, the diplomats agreed on the need for close cooperation along with the U.S. in order to achieve complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. And the U.S. seems to have sent a warning to North Korea to stick with the talks and not return to provocations. With the North's unilateral year-end deadline for the talks coming up, U.S. Strategic Command has released a video on social media demonstrating America's nuclear strike capabilities. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
From an underground missile base, the tip of an intercontinental ballistic missile appears. With a sudden boom, the ICBM blasts off into the sky. This is the U.S. Minuteman III, which can fly 13,000 kilometers and can reach Pyongyang from the U.S. mainland in just 30 minutes. At sea, an enormous nuclear submarine slips under the waves. After inserting the coordinates, a submarine-launched ballistic missile bursts through the water's surface. This is the Trident II, which can carry up to 12 nuclear warheads on a single missile and boasts a destructive force 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima toward the end of World War II. The video cuts to a B-2 Spirit and a B-52 bomber take off. The B-2 Spirit flies into the enemy's air defense zone, then drops 16 nuclear bombs. The stealth bomber can carry up to 31 tons of bombs halfway around the world, conduct a nuclear attack, and return to base. The three types of nuclear weapons were initially unveiled in 2017 when tensions between Pyongyang and Washington were at their peak. The United States is closely watching North Korea's movements amid speculation of provocations after the regime warned it might give the U.S. a, quote, Christmas gift. The U.S. flew yet another surveillance aircraft over the Korean peninsula on Tuesday, according to private military aviation tracker Aircraft Spots. It tweeted a U.S. E-8C airborne early warning and control aircraft dubbed the Joint Stars was spotted for the first time in 3 days. The aircraft has the ability to detect, track, and hand off targeting information on enemy forces on the ground. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Japan has been trying to find ways to deal with an ever-growing amount of radioactive water since the 2011 earthquake and tsunami that caused leaks at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. After years of research, Japan says it's seriously considering discharging the water into the sea. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
Approximately 1.1 million tons of radioactive water are stored at Japan's disabled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, and it's still building up by an average of 170 tons a day. Tokyo's industry ministry recommended on Monday 3 measures that could be used to discharge the radioactive water. First, gradually releasing it into the sea. Second, vaporizing it into the air. Third, a combination of both methods. The government subcommittee established in November 2016 to research the matter explained that a controlled discharge of the radioactive water into the ocean would stably dilute and disperse it. Although the final decision lies in the hands of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet, the subcommittee maintains that dumping the water into the ocean would create a, quote, significantly small health risk to humans. It did not explain when and for how long the radioactive water could be discharged, but added the Japanese government must take full responsibility and make a final decision. It's now left to be seen how South Korea reacts, as Seoul has long opposed Tokyo discharging the radioactive water into the sea. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Midnight Mass on Christmas Eve has been held for centuries at the Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris. But this year, because of the fire back in April, it'll have to be held elsewhere. Yoon Jung-min tells us more.
For the first time in more than 200 years, there will be no midnight mass this Christmas at Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris because of the fire in April. That's according to a spokesperson for the Paris diocese. This is something that has not happened in more than 2 centuries since the French Revolution.
The cathedral, she is 855 years old. She's an old lady. And it's true that cathedrals always celebrate Christmas. But after the revolution, the cathedral has always held Mass even during World War II.
The cathedral is slowly being restored after its roof and spire were destroyed in the April fire. Due to the reconstruction work, the midnight mass will be held at another one of the city's oldest churches, the nearby Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois. There will be a wooden liturgical platform in the church resembling Notre-Dame's, and the service at midnight on Christmas Eve will be led by Notre-Dame rector Monsignor Chauvet. Still, some people said they feel...
And I can't believe I'm not going to do Christmas.
Midnight Mass at Christmas has always been a special event at Notre-Dame, which boasts more than 850 years of history. Before it burned, the cathedral was home to a 160-member choir school, which provided singers for each and every one of its some 1,000 services a year. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Looking back on 2019, South Korea had many world-first achievements in smart technologies. Oh Soo-young revisits those milestones and looks at how the country can continue building its strength in artificial intelligence.
Korea has set major milestones in connectivity this year with state-of-the-art smart technologies. In April this year, the country became the first in the world to commercialize a 5G mobile network, which runs up to 20 times faster than LTE. Since then, telecom firms have not only provided super-fast connections, but partnered with various industries to produce unique solutions, from super-fast video streaming and robot baristas to smart factories and ambulance systems, all of which require ultra-high precision and seamless streaming of data and video that only 5G can provide. Korea, for the first time in the world, successfully test-drove an autonomous car on city streets using the 5G network. As the country plans to build its competitiveness in artificial intelligence, Korea's state-of-the-art mobile infrastructure and smart devices could become a core source of strength.
There's this enormous task around the world that the globe is facing to take all these technologies and then essentially install them. And because of that, there's going to be an enormous, trillions and trillions of dollars of investments that are going to have to be made there. There are going to be niches. There are going to be areas that Korea can carve out and become really, really good at. Like, for example, AI and smart cities.
But experts say Korea needs a more enabling policy environment and a more liberal use of data to foster innovation.
The key is to have good, reasonable privacy rules that don't enable abuse, but that let companies or organizations, the organizations could be a cancer research institute or it could be educational researchers. AI is going to play a really important role in that. But if you lock down data, which I think is what Korea has done, and definitely is what Europe has done, it'll be more difficult to be an AI economy.
South Korea plans to draft a framework for permissionless innovation next year and encourage active use of public data to foster an AI-based economy by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market action this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time on this Christmas Eve.
Thank you very much for having me on this Christmas Eve.
Well, China has announced it's cutting tariffs on a wide range of goods from around the world as it tries to get a trade deal with the U.S. And on Wall Street, stocks again at all-time highs. Take us through the global markets.
Sure. As you said, China will cut tariffs on hundreds of products ranging from the frozen pork to high-tech parts next year, lowering the trade barrier to support the economy. On the statement, Chinese authorities said that import tariffs on 859 items will be reduced from January 1st. As you know, the world's second largest economy, China, has typically used high tariffs to protect local industries. And China has been fighting a long-running trade war with the U.S. and face series of domestic challenges. With the decline of the import prices due to the tariffs, we think that the inflation numbers will be lowered quite significantly. As you know, the inflation number rose quite sharply in last month by more than 4.5% because of the 110% rise of the pork prices due to the outbreak of the African swine fever. With that, overall, consumer market will be quite positively affected. We think that the lower inflation numbers would be positively affected because the Chinese government can use the additional boosting measures. Due to this, if you look at the U.S. market, it continues to show rising trend despite that it is hitting the record high level. And also China, after yesterday's quite significant correction, today it is rising quite sharply. We think that overall, these two countries will continue to show a rising trend in terms of equity prices.
Well, Korean stocks have been doing pretty well lately, with the exception of today. What's going on here?
Yes. Well, as you know, Korean equity market, the Kospi, has been quite a big of a weak equity market relative to other global market. But nevertheless, it did hit 2,200 level, which we have predicted and expected. But if you look at it, though, as I said, it is one of the worst performing equity market in the world because it has been it rose by only 7.3%. Year to date versus global equity market rising by 24%. In fact, Kosdaq is actually down by more than 5.3% year to date. So it is, Korea has been one of the worst performing market. The main reason for that is because of the corporate governance issues and very low dividend payout ratios and also higher tax rate on a corporate front. Overall, more regulations been implied, which has been very much negatively affected. If you look at the economic growth rate as well, it has been negatively affected because of the higher regulations and a low number of the facility investment. And we're probably lagging in terms of the fourth industrial revolution industry's investment. And as if China continues to gain its momentum, Korea might be lagging once again in 2020. If that's the case, we think the Korean equity market's performance is not going to be as good as global equity market once again next year.
Right. Well, today, the big story, of course, President Moon, Prime Minister Abe of Japan, China's #2. They're holding a summit, working on a free trade deal, the export restrictions between Korea and Japan. What do you think might be achieved here, and would it do much in the markets?
Sure. As you said, top leaders of China, Japan, and South Korea met for a summit in Beijing on Monday. They are discussing various topics. First, Xi Jinping and the Moon-Abe, China and Korea met, and they were talking about the deepening and developing strategic cooperative partnership, accommodating each other's core interests and major concerns. And they're talking about North Korea issue as well. We think that the relationship between Korea and China has been quite good after the SAD incident a few years ago. And it is definitely affecting positively for the Korean economy. But as for the Japan and Korea, as you know, there has been there's been issues because of the fight between these two countries in regarding the trade war and prohibiting export to import-export of between Korea and Japan. However, though, they have been meeting together and they're discussing to lower these tariffs. If that's the case, then we think that things will go in a positive direction. All in all, the political issue are affecting these three countries' equity market performances. And we have to watch closely how this development happens between these three countries in the future. All in all, any discussion, any positive indication of the deregulation is happening, that could affect positively for the global equity market.
Well, we should hear something in the next couple of hours from the Korea-Japan meeting. In the meantime, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for making time today, and Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Now, in other news, the CEO of Boeing has been let go, forced by the board to resign as the company tries to rebuild trust following two deadly crashes of the MAX 737. Our Ji-young has more.
Dennis Muilenburg was forced to step down from his post as the chief executive officer of Boeing on Monday in the wake of the two fatal crashes of the company's 737 MAX airliner. Nearly 350 people perished in the disasters, and the families of the victims accused Boeing of putting profit before safety. Muilenburg started at Boeing as an intern in 1985 and rose to the company's top seat in 2015. Boeing says David Calhoun, a board member since 2009, will replace Muilenburg as CEO and president from January 13th. Boeing said it needed a change to restore confidence in the company as it works to repair relationships with all of its stakeholders, including regulators and customers.
Air safety is of utmost importance, and someone's, got to be ultimately responsible for what's going on with Boeing. So, bring in someone who can fix the problems.
Boeing has been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons since the 737 MAX was grounded due to two fatal crashes, the first in Indonesia last October and the second in March this year in Ethiopia. Last October, the 737 MAX crashed into the sea with 189 people on board 13 minutes into the flight after taking off from Jakarta. In March, a Kenya-bound 737 MAX crashed in Ethiopia, killing all 157 people on board. A flaw in the jet's flight control system was implicated in both crashes. Boeing said last week it was going to temporarily halt production of the 737 MAX after the Federal Aviation Administration rejected the jet's return to service before next year. It's the first time in 20 years that the production of Boeing's 737 series has been suspended. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Semiconductor companies, mostly in South Korea and China, are planning to add a record amount of new wafer capacity in the next 2 years, a sign they expect demand to pick up. Researchers at IC Insights project that next year for 200mm wafers, companies will add capacity for as many as 17.9 million units. In 2021, they're expected to add another 20.8 million. With a glut in the memory chip market, companies had delayed adding more capacity. These additions, though, are expected to raise the average annual growth of semiconductor production by 5.9% through 2024. South Korea is expecting a gray Christmas, with fine dust pollution affecting air quality in many parts of the country. A recent study shows that high levels of fine dust make people more vulnerable to the flu. Choi Jung-yoon reports.
In the second week of December, for every 1,000 people who'd been to a hospital or clinic as an outpatient, 28.5 were suspected of having the flu. That was a 3.5-fold increase from a month earlier.
I had some phlegm in my throat, I started to cough, and I had a high fever.
The increase in the number of flu cases is related to the recent bad air quality. According to a study by South Korean medical researchers, higher levels of fine dust causes the infection rate of 6 out of 7 respiratory-related viruses to rise. It has an especially strong effect on the influenza virus.
The infection rate of the influenza virus increased more than any other virus when there were high concentrations of fine dust for 2 or 3 weeks.
The researchers say fine dust makes it easier for the virus to penetrate the epithelial cells that cover the surface of the body. It also makes it harder for the body to fight infections.
With the same virus, you are more exposed to illness because fine dust weakens your immune system.
Experts say it is important to prevent infection by washing one's hands and body after going out when the fine dust levels are high. And because fine dust levels are expected to rise during the holiday season, they say it's also important to avoid crowded places where the virus spreads. 최정윤, Arirang News.
The Korean singers Baekho and Cheongha, working with a well-known philosopher, have released a promotional video in English on Seoul's historical sites. In collaboration with Professor Seo Kyung-duk of Sungshin Women's University, the first part of the singer's video explains the significance of historical sites along the ancient city walls and how they were built and restored. The second part takes viewers through major cultural hotspots in Seoul, including the Bukchon and Dongdaemun areas. Seo says he hopes the videos in multiple languages, including English, Chinese, and Japanese, will spread awareness of the city's 600 years of history as Korea's capital. The music video for the hit song I Need You by K-pop superstars BTS has reached 200 million views on YouTube. With this latest milestone, BTS now have 14 music videos with over 200 million views, including DNA and Boy With Love, the most by any K-pop act. I Need You is the title track from the boy band's 2015 mini-album, The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Part 1. Last month, the track was selected by Billboard as one of the 100 songs that defined the 2010s. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.